Again, a pretty intense set, this one. You have to actually hang on to every clue. There's a lot of depth in the clues, and in questions like this, you literally have to hang on to every clue and be able to get through. So let's have a look at what this is saying. 6 friends, Akshat, Satish, Vinesh, Neeraj, Banu, and Aman went to Wonderla and amusement park in Humbly. After enjoying the rides, they went to purchase souvenirs from the park. All the items were equally priced at 450. So this is the first piece of information. They went to this thing and they purchased souvenirs, and every souvenir is worth 450. Before they purchased the items, the 6 people had amounts in multiples of thousands, not more than 7,000. So this is the point where you realize, okay, the amounts are in thousands, multiples of thousands, not more than 7,000. So that gives me seven possible numbers for this, right? But there are only 6 people. So we have a situation where we need to drop one of these 7 numbers to be able to get to exactly how much we need, or how much these 6 people are carrying. So there must be some clue later which will tell us that. Each person purchased a distinct number of items. So this is the next important information to put into our set. So maybe we can put this in our main table only. So each person purchased distinct number of items, and no one borrowed any money to fund their purchase. So no borrowing for purchase. That means whatever money you came with, if you came with 1,000 rupees, you can only buy 1 or 2 items because you had enough money to buy what you wanted. You did not borrow money for purchase. After the 6 of them completed the shopping, they realized that the amounts left with some of them, would not be enough to pay for the cab fare back to their respective homes. So they redistributed total amount with them among themselves, such that the amount with each person after the redistribution was exactly enough for the cab fare to the respective homes. So the cab fares are given. The cab fares for the 6 person are 430, Neeraj, Vinesh. See, this is respectively. So Neeraj is 430, Vinesh is 780, Satish is 630. That's what you've done. I've done here. I've put these numbers according to that number. Akshat has 1590. Manu and Aman has 1720 and 1450 respectively. Right. So we reach this point in the table, which is the basic information of the table. So we move on to the clues now. The first clue says no one purchased more than 10 items. Okay, now before we move on to the clues, no one purchased greater than 10. Or maybe we can just put this as a shorter one. Bought is less than equal to 10. How many items anybody bought is less than equal to 10. Or maybe we can just put it in this part of the table. So before we move on, we still have to work out how much money they came with. So if I look at the sum of the cab fares, now what they're saying is after the initial amount they came with, number of items bought, so how much you spent and how much you're left with, the sum of what is left has to be equal to the sum of the cab fares, because what we are being told is that after redistribution, they had exactly the amount enough for the cab fare for each one of them. Right? So after redistribution, this clue is important. After redistribution, everybody had exactly enough for the cab fare to the respective homes. So the amount left, total amount left will be the sum of the cab fares. So if I just do the quick sum of the cab fare, 1500, 2100, 2800, 3200, 4900, 6300, 6370, 6400, 6480, 6510, 6600. The total cab fare required is 6600, which means that the total amount left must be 6600. And if the total number of items bought is n, let's say, the total spending is n into 450. Now, this scenario that there are 6 people and 7 possible values with which they came up gives us 7 possible values for the total amount. The first possible value is that if nobody came with 7,000 and people came with 1,000, 6,000, the total amount they brought in was 21,000. And 21,000 minus n into 450 should give you 6,600. Or, in other words, 21,000 minus 6,600 should be equal to n into 450. So if you do that on a calculator, you come up with 21,000 minus 6,600, for example. 21,000 minus 6,600, 14,400. And if you divide that by 450, you get n as 32 in this case. This is a scenario in which there's nobody coming with 7,000. 7,000 is dropped. And you have 7 possible values of what you can drop. You could drop 6,000 also. If you're dropping 6,000, then the people are coming with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 7,000. That means the total amount with you is 22,000. And then 22,000 minus 6,600, which is 15,400, has to be n into 450. But you can check that in this case, n does not come out as an integer. 15,400 divided by 450. It's a decimal, 34.22. Right? So we can't drop the 6,000. If we drop the 5,000 and say that people came with 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, 6K, and 7K, the total amount is 23,000. The total amount they came with, and the total amount they're left with is 6,600. That means they spent 16,400. And that has to be equal to n souvenir items into 450. Now, the number of souvenir items has to be an integer. And you can see that this is again not divisible by 450. You can, I mean, you can avoid the calculator here. For example, 450 here is a multiple of 3. And there's no 3 inside 15,400. And same here, 164, 16400 does not have a 3. So there's no way 450 will cancel this out. Right? And then if you drop the 4,000, you will get to 24,000 total amount. And after subtracting 6,600, you'll get to 17,400. Again, is this a multiple of 450? Right? You can cancel this 3 here, become 150. But again, this is a multiple of 9, and this is not a multiple of 9. Right? So this will not work. And then this was if you cancel out 4,000, that means people came with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. So 18 plus 24, 24,000. If you create the 6 people coming with 1,000, 2,000, remove the 3,000 and get the others, you will have 25,000 total. People came with 1,000, 2,000, and 4, 5, 6, 7. So 4, 5, 6, 7 is 22, and 1,000, 2,000 is 3,000. So people, if nobody came with 3,000, then people came with the other 6 values. Total amount is 25,000. The amount after what is left, this is the amount spent, 18,400. Not a multiple of 450. This is not a multiple of 3 or 9. So this is gone. Likewise, you can reject the 2,000 case. You can reject the 2,000 case because if you reject the 2,000, people came with 26,000. And after spending, they're left with 6,600. That means the spending was 19,400. Again, this is not a multiple of 3. So this cannot be a multiple, and will not be an integer in this case. Again, so this is also gone. And then last one is if you remove 1000, then you are talking about 27,000. And subtract 6600, you are starting with 20,400. Is this a multiple of 450? This is a multiple of 3, but not a multiple of 9. Well, this is a multiple of 9, so this is not going to cancel out. It's going to be, and it's going to be a decimal. And hence you realize that nobody came with 7,000, and that's the only value possible here. And people came with the 6 values of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. So let me just clean this out and put the relevant parts. This is all the items bought is distinct. Everything is less than equal to 10. And amount left is 6,600. The cap fare total is 6,600. And the 6 amounts people came with are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, and 6,000. And these have to be distributed amongst these 6 people based on the other clues. Akshat was left with 1850 after he completed his shopping. So Akshat was left with 1850 after he completed his shopping. Now, your spending is basically a multiple of 450. Depending on how many you bought, your spending will be a multiple of 450. Right? How many items you bought, how many souvenirs you bought. Your spending is going to be a multiple of 450. So if you are left with 1850, this number is not accessible from initial amount of 1,000 or 2,000. If your initial amount is 3,000, you would need to spend 1150 to get to 1850. But 1150 is not part of this series. So 3,000 can't be Akshat's amount. At 4,000, if Akshat came with 4,000, he would need to spend 2,150. 2,150 is not a multiple of 450 again, because 2,250 is a multiple of 450. So Akshat cannot come with 4,000 also. At 5,000, if Akshat came with 5,000, he would need to spend 3,150 buying 7 items to get to 1,850. So this is the only possibility for Akshat. Because at 6,000, he needs to spend 4,150, which is again not a multiple of 450. I mean, the spendings are only these, all the way to 450 into 10. Right? So this means that Akshat came with 5,000, bought 7 items worth 3,150, and is left with 1,850. So this is the only structure possible for Akshat. And nobody else can buy 7 items now, because we know that everybody bought a distinct number of items. Aman was left with more than what he needed for the cap, whereas Manu was short by more than 1,000. Now this is the clue which is not direct, it's an indirect clue. Aman is left with cap fare plus. I'm just putting it in that symbol. Aman was left with more than what he needed for the cap. So Aman is left with, because we know Aman's cap fare, Aman is left with 1,450 plus. Manu was short by more than 1,000. So Manu was short by more than 1,000. Manu's cap fare is 720. So Manu left with something below 720. Right? It cannot be 720 or more. He can't be left with 800, for instance. So Manu left with less than 720. And this clue is an indirect clue at this point. It can't be used directly because there are too many possibilities here right now. Right? The next clue. Manu went to the store with more than 1,000. It should be 1,000. Manu went to the store with more than 1,000, but had half the amount that Vinesh had. Now, half the amount that Vinesh had gives me 2 possibilities here. Manu 2,000. Vinesh 4,000, Manu 3,000, Vinesh 6,000. These are two possibilities we get for Manu and Vinesh, right? And then they say Manu was left with half the amount that Vinesh left with Vinesh right after they made their respective purchases. So whatever Manu was left with, if Manu was left with X amount, Vinesh was left with 2X amount. So what now we need to, and the other clue is Satish purchased exactly 4 items. So Satish spent 1,800 rupees. And the clues are over. So there's nothing else left to do but analyze the remaining two clues and try to work out what scenarios can happen. If you put 2,000 for Manu, I need a little bit of space, so I'm rubbing this off. If you put 2,000 for Manu, Manu is left with less than 720. So if Manu is left with if Manu came in with 2,000 and he has to be left with less than 720. This can only happen if he bought 3 items for 450. In which case he spent 1,350, he's left with 650. Or he bought 4 items for 450 each. So he spent 1,800. So he's left with 200. Right? And in case Manu was at 2,000, Vinesh is at 4,000. And Vinesh's leftover should be 1,300. Because the amount left with Vinesh is double the amount left with Manu. That means Vinesh spent 2,700 rupees, which means he bought 6 items at 450. The second scenario is if Manu is left with 200, Vinesh is left with 400. That means he spent 3,600, which means he bought 8 items of 450 rupees each. So these two scenarios happen at 2,000, 4,000. What about 3,000, 6,000? We still need to analyze that. So let's make that out here. If Manu came with 3,000 and to be left with less than 720, he has to buy either 6 items what 5? Can he buy? He can't buy 1 item. He can't buy 2 items, 3 items. Can he buy 4 items? In 4 items, he'll spend 1,800, so he'll be left with 1,200. No. Can he buy 5 items? No. Can he buy 6 items? If he buys 5 items, he'll spend 2,250. So he'll be left with 750, contravention of less than 720. Manu was short by more than 1,000. Manu's cap fare is 1,720, so his amount left has to be below 720. So 5 items he can't buy. 6 items for 450 rupees each. So he spent 2,700, right? And he's left with 300 rupees, right? And he can't buy 7 items in this case because that will cross 3,000 rupees. And nobody borrows money to purchase their souvenirs. So in that case, so what about Vinesh in this case? Vinesh, in this case, Vinesh came in with 6,000 and is left with 600, which means he needs to spend 5,400. And at 450 rupees per item, he'll need to buy 12 items to spend 5,400, which is a contradiction of less than equal to 10 for everybody. So we come down to we clearly understand that Manu must have come with 2,000 and Vinesh must have come with 4,000. So we reach this point in the solution, but inside this, there's a two possibility situation right now. The two possibilities are Manu bought 3 items, Vinesh bought 6 items. Actually, one more thing which I have missed out is once we realized that from our initial discussion that people came with 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K, and 6K. So they came with 21,000 total. And they were left with 6,600. So they were the spending, total spending was 14,400. And N into 450 was 14,400. So the value of N turns out to be 32 in this case. Let me just check that on the calculator. Yeah, 14,400 divided by 4,450. 32 is the case, right? So the value of N is 32. Total 32 items have been bought. So there are two scenarios. Satish is 4. For Vinesh and Manu. Manu bought 3 items. Vinesh bought 6 items. Or Manu bought whatever done here, yeah. Sorry, Manu bought Manu bought 3 items, Vinesh bought 6 items. Or Manu bought 4 items and Vinesh bought 8 items. So if we match this with the remaining now amongst the values 2,000, 4,000, 5,000, these three are used up. We're left with 1,000, 3,000, 6,000, right? And it is told to us I mean, it's very clear. A couple of things are very clear that Aman cannot be 1,000. So we are left with 3 numbers, 1,000, 3,000, 6,000. Right? And Aman cannot come with 1,000. Because if he comes with 1,000, then how can he be left with 1,450? How can his cap fare be 1,450 and Aman was left with more than what he needed? So Aman, the amount left with Aman is more than 1,450. So Aman cannot come with 1,000. Can he come with 3,000? Now, in this scenario, the total has to be 32 in this row. So in the first scenario, 7 plus 4, these 3, 7, 4, and 6 are 7 and 4 are fixed. In this case, this is 6 and this is 3. So we are heading to 20 in this case. And that means these two blanks have to add up to 12 in this case. And with 7, 4 and this 8 and 4, this heads to 23, 7. Now this is a contradiction. 8 and 4 is not possible because 4 here and 4 here, everything is distinct, remember? So we actually know that this is 7, 4, 3, 6. So we also know that Vinesh spent 2,700 rupees and was left with 1,300 rupees. And Manu spent 1,350 rupees and was left with 650 rupees. Bought 3 items. So we are left with 12 items left. Yes. Right? And also, since we know that he is, and only 1,000, 3,000, 6,000 is left. Only 3 numbers are left. If we analyze Satish at this point, we see that Satish has spent 1,800 rupees on 4 items. So he cannot be 1,000. And Aman cannot be 1,000. So it's necessary that Neeraj has come with 1,000. And he could have bought 1 or 2 items. But if he buys 1 item, then Aman will have to buy 11 items to get to 12, which is not possible. It means that Neeraj bought 2 items for a total of 900 rupees and he was left with 100 rupees. And Aman bought 10 items for 4,500 rupees. And since he's left with more than 1450, Aman must have come with 6,000 rupees and must be left with 1,500 rupees. And which means Satish must have come with 3,000 rupees and left with 1,200 rupees. So this completes our table, and the answers can be read off from the table. How many items did Aman purchase? First question. How many items did Aman purchase? It has to be necessarily 10. Option A is the correct answer to this. How much extra less did Neeraj need for his ride back home? Need or have? I should say need or have. How much extra did Neeraj have or need for his ride back home? So if you look at Neeraj, Neeraj needs 430 for his cab fare, out of which he's left with 100. So 330 is the correct answer to this question. Right. So the first answer is 10. The second answer is 330. Let's look at the third one. Who were the people who needed to borrow to book a cab? Akshat is sufficient. Satish is sufficient. Vinesh has more money than he needs. Neeraj is one guy. And Manu is the other guy. So two people need to borrow. Neeraj and Manu. So two people need to borrow here. Option B is the right answer. What is the total amount left with Satish and Vinesh combined immediately after the 6 persons purchased the items? Fourth question. Satish is left with 1,200 and Vinesh is left with 1,300. So the correct answer to this is 2,500. And what is the total number of items purchased by Akshat and Manu combined? Akshat 7 items and Manu 3 items. So this is again 10. So option C is right. So the answers are A, 330, B, 2,500, and 10.